So the last thing I want to talk about is the value of truth. Remember David Hilbert, we will know, we must know. Truth at any cost. Well, supposing the cost is high. So supposing that extensive historical and logical and archaeological inquiry reveals to us that our religion is just false, right? Supposing we have a national religion that tells us that we have always lived in this place. We, insert name of nation, have always belonged in this place. We were placed here by the God that we worship in order to till this soil and fish these waters and so on, right? And that's our religion. And what's more, it gives us some indication of when we were placed there. And then along come the archaeologists and the DNA studies people and the linguists and say, well, you say that, but your language is related to the languages of these other people, 1,000 miles away. And what's more, linguistic evidence suggests that you didn't leave, that they didn't leave you, you left them, that you migrated to where you currently live from over there. And the DNA people come along and say, yes, and you know what? DNA studies say the same thing. When that happens, it's called consilience, by the way, when you have two bodies of evidence that give you the same conclusion so that they support each other, consilience. So we have consilient science telling us that we didn't always live here, that we migrated here from some other place 1,000 miles away. And what's more, the archaeology supports that, and it indicates that we've been here for longer than our creation myth suggests. Now let's imagine that all of this was really sort of central to the religion, that it's not just a bit of incidental folk detail in the holy book, but it's actually really important to what the religion is about. That could be socially disastrous. It could be personally disastrous, right? But of course, this is exactly what Europeans lived through in the 19th century, right? For centuries, Christians had believed that some version of the Bible stories must be true. I mean, exactly how the details work out. You say, well, maybe the writers of the Bible added some local colour, didn't get all the details right, but some version of biblical history, the creation, the flood, and so on. Some version that's got to be true. And you may know, of course, that there were scholars who worked out exactly how old the Earth is by counting back the generations mentioned in the Bible. And then along come the geologists who say, well, actually, the Earth is much older than the Bible tells you. I mean, much older, orders of magnitude. It's millions of years old rather than just thousands. And what's more, there are all these animals that weren't mentioned in the ark, enormous lizards and, woolly mammoths and whatnot. And there are people that the Bible doesn't mention. So one of the things, one of the great shocks was the discovery of people living in the Americas, because theologians had to think of themselves, well, wait a minute, if there are these people living in North and South America, how were they supposed to be saved? First of all, how did they get there, given our biblical understanding of the past? And second, how were they supposed to be saved? Because it seems like, God's plan for them was to just wait 1,600 years and then have some missionaries turn up. That seems very odd. So there were these blows to the factual claims made by Christianity. And this was live stuff in Nietzsche's century, in the 19th century. So what do you do? Well, you can just fight back directly. So you can invent creation science. You can try and insist that no, the creation story is true, and you can try and fight the geologists and the molecular biologists and the DNA studies and so on, point by point. Or you can invent liberal theology, where you invent a version of Christianity which doesn't say anything about how old the earth is, or what the animals, or what its history is, or anything like that. That's still vulnerable, of course, because you can't get rid of the Gospels. You can't turn the Gospels into just some some made-up stories without losing Christianity pretty centrally. So Christianity is still vulnerable to historical investigation of the gospel stories. So what's going on here? Let's suppose, which I think Nietzsche thought, that Christianity isn't just something that some people do on a weekend. It is the spiritual, metaphysical, political, moral basis of Western civilization. And that if we all stop believing it, we will find ourselves lost. And on some level, the geologists and the historical scholars and archaeologists and so on must have all known this as well. So if you pursue truth at any cost, you run the risk of sort of undermining the very foundations of your own society. But we seem to have taken the decision to do that, right? We must know, we will know. And of course, this is itself, within Christianity, a religious precept. Thou shalt not bear false witness. So I think what Nietzsche's saying here is that the pursuit of truth at any cost, it's a transcendental ideal. Why? Well, because if you pursue something that isn't immediately necessary for human flourishing at any cost, including possibly at the cost of human flourishing, right? Then you've chosen something other than human flourishing in this life, right? You've decided to sacrifice human well-being for the sake of something immaterial, for the sake of something you can't touch, for the sake of a value, right? So the picture here is that, as I said in the earlier lecture, God is truth. That the pursuit of truth is a kind of offshoot or outgrowth of the worship of God, and the pursuit of truth at any cost you can think of as being a kind of generalized version of placing God above all things. And so we have, in a sense, dug our own grave. And one other thought: what if Nietzsche is himself part of this? Nietzsche talks about truthfulness. Nietzsche holds himself and everybody else to very high standards of truthfulness. Nietzsche is very hard on self-deception, even though he's the person explaining to us that a little myth, a little self-deception, some useful or consoling stories can actually be very healthy for human beings because they help us to flourish. So he's busy explaining that truth isn't necessarily always conducive to human well-being. He's explaining that to us, and at the same time insisting on truthfulness. So he, having explained to us that human well-being and truthfulness can come apart, is insisting, given the choice, on truthfulness. So doesn't that make him also a votary of the ascetic ideal?